maybe shaped a bit weird and look a little bit silly, but this is still a pretty solid handheld. Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Nas, and today we're taking a look at the RG406V. The RG406V is not a new device at this point. In fact, it came out several months ago, which in retro handheld time makes it as old as the dinosaurs. But this doesn't mean it doesn't still have a lot to offer. This device will give you decent PS2 performance for under $200, which is quite impressive to be honest. The RG406V runs a build of Android 13. It rocks a nice 4-inch IPS touchscreen display with a resolution of 960 by 720. It has 8GB of RAM, as well as a chipset that means nothing to me. I'll probably have more details on the device's specs show up on the screen as I talk about this, but honestly, if all you care about is specs here, you're probably on the wrong channel. I usually look into what a device can play, and it's pretty much all that matters to me. You might have noticed, but the RG406V is a little chunky and weird, but I think it might actually work in its favor. The bumps on its back make it a very comfortable device to hold, and they even included these two little recesses, I don't know how to call them, at the bottom that perfectly welcome your fingers. Add to this a pretty good plastic body that doesn't feel cheap, and overall, it is a solidly built little Game Boy. On the left side of the RG406V, you'll find a button in a micro SD card slot. I don't know if the button has any other uses, but for me, it just opens the RG launcher, which I never use. On the right, we have a power button and a volume rocker. At the bottom, we have two down-firing speakers and a headphone jack. At the top, there's an LED, which will let you monitor the device while it's charging, an air intake hole, and a USB-C port. At the back, we have a fan, 4 shoulder buttons, a product sticker, and the bumps I mentioned earlier. Finally, at the front of the device, we have this really nice 4x3 touchscreen display. A classic looking D-pad, 4 face buttons, a start and select button, a button that doubles as a home and back Android button, and 2 fairly tall Hall effect joysticks. The joysticks do have RGB rings, but I usually turn that off because it's absolutely blinding at night. Immediately, this D-pad is divine. It's firm, yet not too much. It has good travel time, and it pivots very nicely. This is probably my favorite D-pad ever made right now. The face buttons are also outstanding. If I had to be nitpicky, I'd say they're a little too tall for my tastes. The travel time bothers me a little bit, but otherwise, they feel absolutely great, and they're not too loud. The start and select buttons, however, are pretty underwhelming. They're made of plastic and they feel kind of bad, but I guess it's fine. It's not like we use these buttons all the time, and the Android button itself is exceptionally clicky, but I don't think it really matters either. The problems start arising for me when it comes to the joysticks and the shoulder buttons. The joysticks themselves work fine, I guess, but I really can't get over how they feel. It's probably because they are so tall and not recessed, like we'd usually see on a device like this, but I don't know. I just know that I immediately didn't like them, but I'm still happy we have them on this device. As for the shoulder buttons, they're okay. They're really clicky and they feel kinda cheap, but they work just fine for the most part. The fact that they're not stacked like this really works against them, but they're still functional. And here's how every button sounds, if that's your thing. And, as usual, here's a quick little sample of the speakers and how they sound. Okay. Normally here, I'd move over to an overview of all the retro consoles I care about and how they play, but I honestly don't want to bore you. Throughout this entire video, I should have included clips of me playing various systems. And while yes, this little Game Boy looking guy is amazing for all of the super retro stuff, it's also not surprising and not really worth spending too much time on. As you'll see later, this device can play a decent amount of PS2, and if it can do that, it's safe to assume it can play pretty much anything older than that. Again, this D-pad is probably my favorite D-pad ever right now. So all of your Nintendos and Game Boys are gonna work great on this, I promise. The 4x3 screen is a great match for all of it too. And even though it's an LCD panel, I think this screen still looks really, really good. What is great here, if not surprising, is how good the GameCube, Wii, and PS2 experience is on this little guy. For around $165 US, I was surprised by how much PS2 I was able to get out of it. Sure, it will not run everything the PS2 has to offer. For example, even dropping Rogue Galaxy down to 1x resolution did not give me great results. However, even though Ratchet & Clank initially struggled to run for me, once I switched from OpenGL to Vulkan, I was able to run the game at 2x resolution without any issues. And finally, some games like Jak and Daxter will have to run in native resolution, but it's still very playable. You really need to manage your expectations, and you may have to fiddle around in the settings as you try games, but getting any amounts of PS2 for that price is still pretty good, and I feel like it deserves some praise. It's about the same thing when it comes to GameCube and Wii. Some games work great and others not so much. At some point, I got tired of changing settings around, so I just left everything at native resolution and hoped for the best as I tested games. And to be honest, that's totally fine for me. If you're interested in PSP, I'd honestly look elsewhere. While I love this screen and the PSP runs great on the RG406V, the 4x3 screen kinda makes this an horrible experience. And yeah, it looks like you can also get some 3DS out of it. I really think I am overestimating the required specs to run 3DS at this point because I keep getting surprised by this. For anything 4x3, I think this device is a no-brainer. You could go for something cheaper if you really do not care about PS2, GameCube, and Wii, and to some extent N64, but you could really do worse than the RG406V. I never really paid attention to the battery life personally, but it seemed really good. So I went online to see what people were saying, and it looks like people are getting 8 to 12 hours of battery life out of this thing. Charge time seemed pretty on par with anything without fast charging, getting a full charge in about 3 hours. Now, if I wanted to complain about this device, I would point out that I really do not like the joysticks. They are super functional, don't get me wrong, but to me, they really do not feel good. I would also point out that the shoulder buttons need to change. I don't know the logistics or even if it's possible to have stacked shoulder buttons on a device like this, but it would be much better if they were. Next, I'd probably mention that at times, the face buttons can be quite squeaky, as if they were rubbing against the device's shell. It's a bit nitpicky since I like these face buttons so much, but I think it's worth a mention. Then, and this one is probably very personal, but whenever the fan kicks in at full gear, I really do not like how much I can feel it on my fingers. It makes the device vibrate slightly at the top here, and it can be very distracting. But all of this is really minor to me. The biggest issue for me, and that's potentially only a problem with my unit here, but the screen is not centered. If you look on the left and bottom edge of the device's screen, you can clearly see the black bars where the screen ends. I thought I would eventually stop noticing it, but it never happened, which is kind of a shame. Now, to wrap this up, I think I would still recommend the RG406V. It goes for a decently affordable price, and it gives you a lot of bang for your buck. I think it has the best D-pad currently available on the market, and if you're like me, the 4x3 screen and the fact that it looks like a Game Boy will charm you. There are a few things that I wish were different on the RG406V, but this is also true on almost every device I have ever tested. If none of the negatives I've listed bother you, and if you're okay with the ability of only playing some PS2, GameCube, and Wii games, I don't think you'd be disappointed with your purchase. And on that note, this is Nas Syndrome signing out, and I will see you next time. I love your face.